The recording available. So without further ado, I would like to welcome John to start the program.
Okay, can you hear me? Perfect. All right. Thank you so much for having me. And there's a lot of information. I'll try to go through it pretty quickly. But it's just a general overall forest health update. But if anyone's been down in South Carolina, this picture up here is the angel oak. It's a really great tree, and it just really great to see it if anyone has the opportunity down in Charleston area. Okay, so the biggest threats up to Long Island, we already went through this, is Southern Pine Beetle. And oak wilt was around. We'll get into that later. We're officially out of quarantine. We haven't found it in 5 years. But this one is very interesting and different from most threats that we have to Long Island, because it's such a odd thing that we had it. We found it randomly, in Brooklyn and out in Southold and Connecticut area, and then it just kind of disappeared. So still going to talk about it because I want people to just have it in the background, because it may be out there. Just because we haven't found it in 5 years doesn't mean that it's gone. It's just that we may not have found it again. So just to briefly bring everyone up to about pine beetle, it is native to the southern U.S., predominantly in the southern pine forests. And the thing is, pitch pine is actually related to, the shortleaf pine. They actually can hybridize. So that's the problem, is that as we're not seeing the winters like we used to, okay, maybe back on, hopefully. All right. Says I'm muted. So that's the problem, is that the beetle, as it came up here back in 2014, we found it. It's able to reproduce in our native pitch pine species, because it can hybridize with the shortleaf, which is a species down south. So essentially, the beetle came up here and knows the trees and can obviously reproduce. Oops. Get to the next slide. That works. Excuse me. So like I said, this is the current range. And now actually we found it as far north in Maine in traps. So essentially, when the beetle came up here in 2014, we're like the hotbed of it. And actually, since 10 years on, they're starting to find it even as far north as Maine, and that's really concerning that the species is moving that far north. So identification, this beetle is very, very small. I like to, say it's like a chocolate sprinkle size. So that's the problem, is these beetles, multiply. Each female can have about 40 to 50 eggs. So, one beetle becomes 50, becomes, exponential growth. And the way we identify it is, and I'm sure you've seen this driving, throughout Long Island, sadly, is there's 3 stages of attack. And the way we classify it as stage 1 is the trees are still green. You will see beetles in there, but you really won't see it from unless you know what you're looking for. It's kind of hard to see. Stage 2 is really what you see. It start to see this, browning and reddening of the crown, and the beetles are actively killing the tree and reproducing. And then stage 3 is when they're completely dead and they emerged and they're moving on to another tree. Hopefully this works. Okay, great. So here's a great video of a beetle, actually, and that's what they do, is they swim into the tree swim through the sap, I'm sorry, into the tree to, eat and reproduce and lay their eggs. But as you can see, that the tree's only defense is to pitch out. But the beetle, if the tree is healthy and rigorous enough, it'll produce enough sap that the beetle can't get in. But obviously, when there's these massive outbreaks, there's too much for the tree to handle, and then they succumb to attack. There are predatory insects that do attack and feed on these beetles. However, they don't control it. We use it more, like I said, it's monitoring population levels, predator versus prey relationship. So if we see a huge increase of these clared beetle numbers, we know that we have a very large outbreak of Southern Pine Beetle. There are look-alike species. We have a native turpentine beetle, which is the same genus but different species. And sorry, I have two little ones at home, so I may have to run away for a second. This beetle does kill pine trees, but not in the same extent. Usually attacks trees that are weakened already. And it's much larger than Southern Pine Beetle. It's like the size of a grain of rice. The pitch tubes are a lot bigger because the beetle's a lot bigger, and they usually attack, no more than 6 to 8 feet on the trunk. And it's not unusual to see that, where turpentine starts to stress the tree, and then pine beetle will come in and finish the tree off. So here's a good picture. So as you can see, it's just the lower bunch of the tree is attacked by turpentine beetle, whereas Southern Pine Beetle will be 6 foot, 8 foot up the entire length of the tree. And then each, we call these little popcorn kind of looking things, but just to give you the difference in what it looks like. And here's the difference in size. So here's a Southern Pine Beetle, here's a grain of rice, and here's the turpentine beetle. So much, much larger beetles. So, it's 10 years on, we're just seeing that we have to live with pine beetle. It's here. It's not going away. We're not getting the winters we used to, if ever again. As we know, each year they keep saying the news, it's the hottest summer on record. It's just getting warmer and warmer. And we have just thousands of acres of dead trees every single year. It's really, really concerning because, pitch pines are trademark tree of the pine barrens. So the area, what we're trying to do is suppression of the infected areas, thinning our forests to bring them down to a area that we can more handle. And then obviously doing prescribed fire. So that's the goal with all that. The management goals. Let's see here. Sorry, I have two young boys. So one got up. I gotta move to separate rooms. Just give me a minute here.
Thank you for your patience, everyone.
Okay, sorry about that. Better now. All right, so to continue on, we go Go ahead.
We have a quick question in the
Sure.
chat before we get too far. What happens to the beetles when they leave the trees? Do they die also or infect another tree?
They go on to infect another tree. Excuse me, but that's a good question. So each life stage of the beetle is approximately two to 3 weeks. So, adults live for a couple weeks, then the larvae are feeding in the tree for a couple weeks, then they emerge as adults, and the cycle continues.
And then we have two more questions
Sure.
quickly. How do they combat this in the South where it's even more prevalent?
So luckily for us, this beetle is one of the most studied insects of all time. It's, there's some studies that go back to 100 years. So we're really fortunate that there's all this great research that we're just adopting from the South to the North. And why it's not such, it is still an issue in the South, but because it's been there for so long and everyone, essentially knows about it, that, they're just constantly thinning and managing their forests. Down South, there's it's the, what would you call it? The breadbasket of the United States. So you have these huge timber companies or the Forest Service or other, entities that own large tracts, and they're constantly thinning their forests. So when they do get an outbreak, it's very rare. So good for us, because we get a lot more funding because we're such a huge outbreak up here.
And then lastly, is there an initiative to replant pines in decimated areas?
Yes, we are in the process of doing that. We have replanted some areas of South Haven. It's a huge outbreak, but yeah, that's a part too. Is the concern is we're always thinking that's one thing I like about being a forester. We're always thinking 50, 100 years, way past my lifetime. What's the future of the forest going to be? That good? I guess so.
Yes, that's all the
Okay.
questions for now.
All right, so just quickly go over our management goals. So we do aerial surveys a couple times a year. And from there, we're looking for, like I said, those stage 2 and 3 trees, because that's where the outbreaks are. And we go out and ground truth them, and we, create a map, and we're trying to, attempt to manage these areas that are huge outbreaks. But the real goal is we want to get our forest to a status that we're not going to see these large outbreaks. We've done some thinnings on state lands, notably in Rocky Point and our Sarnoff property, if anyone knows DEC lands at all. And we've seen, which is nice to see that it does work, where the beetle will come in and will kill a couple trees, but we don't see these large outbreaks because the trees are spaced out enough that the beetles, when they do come in, aren't able to reproduce in those numbers to spread, because I forgot, I don't know if I have that coming up next, but the way the beetles communicate is they release pheromones. So these pheromones are, tell the beetles to attack the trees and to reproduce. So when we have these, thin forests, or we do a prescribed burn or whatever, we're really open up the canopy. So the beetles are confused. They can't follow the pheromones as well as they could in these dense forests. So when we do suppression, this is kind of what we were talking about. It's like, here's the infestation starts here, goes in a certain direction. It's not necessarily affected by the wind, but it definitely has a factor of it. But essentially what we do is we, cut down the infested trees. And so that way, when the beetles do emerge, like I said, they're confused. They can't really follow those pheromones, and it does slow the infestation. The big problem we've had, though, is because northern long-eared bat has been uplisted to endangered species. And that's really affected us because it's ironically, the bat's doing very well down in Suffolk County, which is a good thing, but it's really hampers our management efforts because, of course, we don't want to, intentionally kill bats. So we haven't been doing much suppression lately, but we're working with the Fish and Wildlife Service to, hopefully change that in the future. Thinning is, like I said, this is the end goal. What we're trying to do is get our forest to a resilient stage that, once, the beetle comes in, it can't really, come in and wipe out areas. So, we're not talking about clear cut. We're talking about, thinning. Essentially, it's basal area is a forestry term. We talk about, square foot per acre, but essentially it comes down to, one tree every 30 feet is a good rule of thumb that, it gets you to that density where the trees, the whole thing is, trees they're all fighting each other for nutrients, water and sunlight and such like that. So if you have a thinned out forest, they're not so stressed out because they have, like I said, more access to sunlight and nutrients. So that's the end goal that we're trying to come. So here's a great picture. So when we say thin forest, hopefully you can see my mouse. This is, a thin forest. This is, you know, obviously you can see much more open. You can imagine that even if we had a wildfire or whatever go in there, it's just going to burn, the grasslands and all that. But here's the unthinned forest to your right, and this is sadly what most of Long Island is because there hasn't been management. We don't have timber sales, timber markets like we do upstate. So there hasn't been management for a very long time. Not necessarily a bad thing, but you can imagine that the beetle is very happy over here. It only has to fly, 5 to 10 feet, and over here it's much more spread out. So you can, imagine that, like I said, even if a beetle comes in and kills, this tree, it's going to be really difficult for that pheromones to communicate for the beetle to move on to the other trees versus in here, it's so dense that you can, see that this area would just really take off. And then of course, for a wildfire risk too, you have so much of these ladder fuels and all that. So, but this is a great picture just to illustrate that, we're not talking clear cuts. We're talking about, thinning the forest out. Oops. This map is a little older, but it's unfortunately still the same story. We do have a huge outbreak in Napeague. If anyone lives out there has been to Montauk lately, you can see just dead trees everywhere along 27. But it's like I said, concerning that it was in New Jersey, it's been in the South, and all of a sudden we found it here, and now we're starting to find it, like I said, upstate and even as far north as Maine. Hopefully this plays. This is, if anyone's aware, this is the area known as the Hills, or where the Hills project is going to go into. And as you can see, this is what we're talking about, this exponential growth, that it starts off in this little area. And then as you can see, it's like it's almost like a bomb is a good way to say. You can see, the spread here is those, you can see that it started off here, and as it spreads, you can see the discoloration of the tree. And the problem is it'll just keep going and going until it runs. It's a good example is like a smokeless wildfire. It'll just keep going until it runs out of pitch pine trees. This was the very first outbreak we had at Henry's Hollow back in 2014 on state land. This is right next to the animal wildlife rehabilitation. I forgot the name of it off the top of my head. But anyway, so this was an issue because, it's county land, state land. The beetle, of course, doesn't care about jurisdictions, but we did go out and suppress it. And I'm very happy to say that, 10 years later, it worked really well. But essentially, we cut all these trees down where the beetle spread, and those trees still go out and are still healthy and surviving. So it's a good example of suppression does work. We just have to get out there in time. And last impacts, I took this picture a couple years ago. It's, we're known for, the pine barrens. We are the largest pine barrens in the state. And, it is something to try to preserve because it is a globally rare ecosystem and obviously state rare ecosystem. So, we're really trying to just preserve what we have left and to protect it. So that's Southern Pine Beetle in a nutshell. I'll answer questions on that before I move on to the next invasive.
All right, so we have a few more questions.
Sure.
Someone said, near me in East Merches, there's a 20 plus acres cleared in February for developments. Its perimeter is loaded with dead pine trees. Does DEC do anything about that situation? Should it be reported?
Unfortunately, we as much as we would like to be, we're not the tree police. We can't really control what people do on private lands. Of course, the concern is with all this, dead and down trees that, there's a wildfire risk, but no, unfortunately, we can't control what people do on private property.
Okay. Since we are eradicating many dead pines, is there a concern that these beetles could adapt to different trees other than pines?
Yes, that is an excellent question. That is the real concern is that even we're very, like I said, we're very fortunate to work with the Forest Service and our partners. They're up in New Hampshire. And the real concern is that we're starting to see it all of a sudden move into white pine, which white pine isn't a huge species in the South. So they've actually seen it where, they have an outbreak, in like longleaf pine or loblolly pine or whatever, and then it moves into white pine and it fizzles out. Sadly, we're starting to see that it is starting to kill white pine. It's white pine's more resilient, but we're starting to see it move into that, and that's a real concern because white pine is a huge species, not only in New York but the Northeast. So the real concern is that it's going to start as we're not getting those cold winters. It's starting to, I don't know if evolve is the right word, but it's seeming to attack, white pine species as well. We've seen it documented where it's killed Norway spruce. Also, that's a big species that's been planted upstate for reforestation purposes. So that's the real worry is as we're getting these not getting these winters, that's going to move into these different species.
Someone was wondering why nothing is being done in West Hampton core where it's infesting nothing but trees. I'm guessing there's trees all over that are laying around, and they're becoming more of a fire hazard.
Nothing being done. I'm not aware of that area.
Yeah. The next question is, what is the impact of the Discovery Land development in East Quogue and Pine Barrens clearing?
I think that's probably the area I had that
Yeah.
the
Hills, right?
yes, yeah, the hills. I guess that's the area. Again, that's private property, so that was sadly it was a good example of do nothing management and how the beetle can just go in and wipe out thousands of trees.
What tree or shrub species colonize the open areas created either by beetle damage and pitch pine removal or deliberate thinning and removal?
That excuse me, that is a real concern is that the pine barrens of course are a mosaic of pitch pine and you have scarlet oak, white oak, black oak. Is that it's just the rapid turnover into more oak barrens versus pine barrens, and that's not good or bad, but just the pine barrens are the way I look at it is keep the pine in the pine barrens kind of thing, because oak trees are great and there's nothing wrong with them, but they're not a globally rare ecosystem. The pine barrens is. So that's the real worry, is when all the pitch pine are killed, now all of a sudden the oak have all this opportunity to move in. Again, not good or bad, it's just different. And we just have that rapid turnover from more pine barrens, more pine dominant stand to a more oak dominant stand. Luckily, as far as other invasives go, the because of the soil acidity, we're not seeing too much invasive species coming in. Usually, on the fringes, you'll see, some more invasive species coming in. But as far as the core going, it's more just that rapid turnover into more oak forests.
And then does this Southern Pine Beetle attack cedar and spruce trees?
I haven't seen that yet. That'll be interesting to see if they do move into it, but I have not seen them attack cedars yet. Or well, Norway spruce, that one, but not yet. But we'll keep an eye out.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, we have one more.
Sure.
I guess this is kind of, Amy, maybe we'll talk about that more at the end because it's still going over the West Hampton area.
Okay.
All right.
All right. On to the next one. Like I said, oak wilt is it's a fungus. It's pretty interesting because it's we have to actually do DNA testing to determine it actually is oak wilt. There's other things that attack oaks and look very similar to it, like bacterial leaf scorch or Phytophthora. But oak wilt's a different one. And like I said, we're officially not in quarantine anymore. We were for a while. So you can freely move oak between Suffolk and Nassau County. But I just want people to be aware that this, I think, is still out there. We just may not be seeing it. So it's, like I said, it's a weird thing. It was identified in the Midwest in the 1940s. And like I said, eradication. It's still around. I just want to make people aware of it. Here's a current range map. It's more of a problem in the Midwest. So when we found it on Long Island, it was a real concern. Just like a lot of these invasive species, people usually, oops, shoot, my battery's low. Hold on, I gotta grab my battery. I ran upstairs without it. Hold on 1 minute. Okay, sorry about that. So, right, people, usually unknowingly, that's a problem, and that's why we have the firewood laws. We don't want people moving wood products that are untreated. So if it's heat treated, that's fine. It kills any species or anything that might be in the wood. But that's how a lot of these things are moved around. So that's my little plug about buy firewood where you burn it. I said this is a little old, but just to make people aware that that is an issue. So the way it spreads is through the root systems, or through wounds on the trees. So we advocate, if you do prune, we prefer, and it's a good idea in general, to just prune in the winter months, because a lot of these, insects are attracted to these wounds. And then what they do is they bring along these diseases and such. But I'll just briefly go over that. So the beetles are attracted to the wounds. They carry the spores, the fungal, mats, and then the fungus grows into the tree, and then it kills the tree, and then it spreads like that. So red oak family. So that's black oak, scarlet oak, reds, of course, seem to be more prone to this. White oaks are shown to be a little more resistant. There's not a whole reason why, but it looks different things. So with a red oak, it's usually the entire tree that gets just turns red. The leaves turn red and just fall off. White oak, it seems like you'll have a branch here or there that is affected. And so the real concern is here. It's a good picture. Is you'll see where, because what it does is the fungus essentially girdles the tree, so the leaves just turn red from the tips inward, and you'll see this happening like July to August. So if you see your oaks that are normally healthy and all of a sudden they start dropping their leaves in July or August, please let us know, because I really think this thing is still out there. It's just we haven't seen it. Like I said, this is for anyone who wants to, we have a whole team of Forest Health dedicated. They're based up in Albany, so I'm your regional person. But like I said, prune during winter months. Try not to prune during the summer months, because those beetles are out moving from tree to tree. And don't move firewood. That's how a lot of these invasives are moved around. And if you see something, please feel free to give us a call, say something, and we'll happily come out and look at your trees. Are there any questions on oak wilt?
We do have a few more questions, but it seems to be more about the Southern Pine Beetle again.
Okay.
Did you want to do that now or
Sure.
at the end?
Sure.
Okay. Someone said their home is surrounded by pines. What is my responsibility if I notice an attack, and will I get help from the state?
Sadly, there is no assistance. I really wish there was. This is such a huge problem throughout the island. Believe me, I get so many calls and questions about it. I really wish there was something you could do, or I wish there was something that we could do, the state, because it is a huge financial burden. And I really feel for some of these homeowners have lost hundreds of trees. So sadly, there's not a whole lot you can do if you have that dense, because I actually live in the Pine Barrens myself, so I know there's your clearing rules. You can't cut your property and stuff. But simple just tree care. If you have some pine trees that are really close to your house and you don't want them to die, just make sure they're watered in the drought months, and just try to take care of them the best you can.
And then we have a question, any preventative for white pines?
Any preventative?
I guess for the Southern Pine Beetle?
Same as the pitch pine. Just make sure that they're watered in droughty months, but there's really not a whole lot you can do, sadly. I know that there has been some work with verbenone out west. There's this it's essentially it's a pheromone that pretty much tells the beetle that this tree is, quote, full of beetles, so don't come here. I know that they've done that. We've tried to use it. It does essentially what it's doing is it's pushing the beetles away. But I would, if you're really concerned, that probably would be a situation where it would work, because you're only dealing with a few trees. The problem, when we're talking about pine beetle management, is we're dealing with, hundreds of thousands of acres and thousands of trees. So, this verbenone isn't really useful in that situation, but it may be for your home. And actually, if anybody wants to do it, just let me know how it does work, because it'd be useful to let others know.
Would you be able to put that in the chat, the name of the pheromone?
Sure, sure.
Just so everyone knows the spelling. And then what causes spruce dieback? They said a little branch will lose its pines. What can I do to combat that? Is there a good fertilizer for spruce or pines?
Oof, that's a really good question. I may have to do the problem is there's a lot of things that cause dieback. So it could be, gee, who knows? But again, as long as, that essentially if the tree's healthy enough, it really shouldn't get these, any of these issues. So it's probably a condition of, it's not receiving enough water, or, and don't go crazy with fertilizer either. Trees are not, they're not like roses. They don't need that much fertilizer. And plus it's, our aquifer, and, just so don't go fertilizer crazy.
Are the green giants or leyland affected by any of these diseases or insects?
Not that we know of. I know leyland cypresses are infamous for being difficult. They're always having issues and stuff like that. But not that I know of. Usually the pine beetle likes to attack trees. I should have mentioned this, but larger diameter trees. They don't seem to attack trees on 6 inches and lower. That being said, we have seen in these huge outbreaks trees as small as 2 inches attacked and killed. It's pretty remarkable. If the beetle's hungry enough, it'll go in. But I haven't heard or seen any of them in leyland cypresses, but that doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. It's just, and that's why this slide is pretty good too, is, we rely on a lot of, the public to let us know about these things. Because I'm only one person. I can't be everywhere. So, if you do see something interesting or weird, please email either me or our forest health team on this slide, and then let us know. Because we really do rely on the public quite a bit for finding a lot of these, diseases and insects. Usually they find them before we do.
For the oak wilt, is there anything a homeowner can do for the tree besides reporting it? If you can cut any of the dying branches or anything like that?
So actually with oak wilt, we do treat this. So if you do have it, we do treat it, no cost to you. So I would say actually with this one, don't try to do it yourself. If you do have it, please call us, because we actually do treat this at no cost.
Are there species dependent on the pitch pine that we may lose as we lose more and more of the pitch pine?
Yes, there's actually quite a few of threatened endangered species that rely on this, the pitch pine, forest. I don't know them off the top of my head. I'd have to look them up. But yes, that's the real concern, is that this, this ecosystem, there's a lot of species that are relying on it. And, it's be a real shame to lose them.
And then do you have any advice to the homeowners, what to tell their landscapers what to do with any debris or wood chips?
Okay. Yep. That's a good one too. We always recommend, if you have the ability to, and I know it's a cost, to chip up everything, because that way anything that's in there, it will be killed. But as far as, if you have a pine beetle infested log, there's no concern about moving it, because the beetle's so well established. It's not like you're going to reintroduce it to a new area thing. But don't, again, don't move firewood, because we don't want to introduce into areas that it isn't, but it is throughout Long Island. So there's no real concern, but chipping is always best.
Looks like that's all the questions for now.
Great. All right, on to Asian longhorn beetle. So there's another invasive. So it's actually been eradicated in the city. Unfortunately, we still have it on Long Island. They actually found it recently in Charleston, Ohio. Charleston, I'm sorry, South Carolina. So this is a real concern. Like I said, don't move firewood because that's how these things are moved. Essentially, you bring maple logs. You want to go camping upstate, and you unwillingly bring it. The current infestation is Amityville, Babylon area, and it's been here for, oh boy, I think 20 something years. So sadly, it's still there. It's still affecting trees, but maples are the real issues. So the problem is, everyone has a Norway maple around somewhere, and the beetles like to attack the maples. So if you live in this area, you're probably aware of it. Hopefully you're aware of it. You probably have had our federal partners, USDA, A.A.S, Animal Plant Health Inspection Services, probably come knocking on your door, look on trees, and they're just constantly on the lookout. And our sister agency, Agriculture and Markets, this is more of their issue. DEC, we're not really dealing with this yet, which is good, because if we deal with it, that means that it got upstate, and maple trees are huge. It's actually the state tree of New York is the sugar maple. So you can imagine all our maple syrup. It's a real concern that this thing gets upstate, because we don't really have sugar maples down on Long Island, because we're pretty much North Carolina in the zone wise. But I just want to make people aware that it is still here, and don't move firewood. So there's it's a really interesting looking insect, and it's large. It's a good 1 to 2 inches in size. And there is a native Sawyer beetle, which is here in the lower right, that attacks white pine, pitch pine, but it's native, so it's not a problematic species like Southern Pine Beetle. But you will see this out and about, so just want to make sure that if you do, we always recommend people to check their pool filters. That's how a lot of these are found. But make sure, if you do have Asian longhorn beetle, I really hope you don't, because that would make the news if it's outside of the area that's affected. These things are very lazy flyers, so they really rely on people moving firewood around. So just want to make people aware that this is a native species, attacks pine trees, and some people confuse it. But if you do see it, please call us or Ag and Markets, and we'll happily come out to make sure that it isn't. And that's it for Asian longhorn beetle. I don't know if there's any quick questions on that.
No current questions.
Okay, great. That's good. It's a good thing. All right, so similar things. Emerald ash borer is more of a problem upstate, because we don't really have the ash forests like we do. To be honest, if I see a white ash tree, I kind of get excited, because I just don't see them. Like I said, I grew up upstate, so it's we're very different from the rest of the state. And this is actually an old map, but I'd like to just show that this has become such a problem back. When I first started working for the department, we tried to have a quarantine, before we were trying to prevent it from moving into the Adirondacks. Sadly, just like, Long Island upstate, we're not getting the winters like we used to. So this beetle is moving. So this actually was an old map, and sadly, emerald ash borer has moved upstate. But it's, again, to hammer home, don't move firewood, because that's how these things are moved. It started out in Wisconsin, Minnesota area, and it's spread throughout the entire Northeast, and it's killed millions and millions of ash trees. Like I said, this is kind of an older map, just to show. And you can see that, ash is a huge tree species throughout the rest of the country. And that's how these things are moved around. So just to make people aware, it's, we do have some ash that has been planted, and it's kind of remarkable to me to see that even though we don't have these, huge swaths of ash forests like we do upstate, the beetle is still here and it is still killing trees. So just to make people aware that it is still a problem. This is, if anyone's ever seen it, we call this blinding. This is where the woodpecker is running up and down the tree because the beetles are in there. These beetles are very, very, very small. They're a really pretty green color. But that's just just to make people aware. If you see this on a tree, that there's definitely something going on. There's some kind of insect in there because the woodpeckers are going crazy trying to get after them. And then that's it for emerald ash borer. I'm trying to do them all quick.
Don't see any new questions yet.
Okay,
So.
great. That's good. All right, lanternfly. I'm sure everyone's aware of this. If not, it's coming. We're finding it in Western Suffolk. It's moved through the city out to us. The real concern is when it gets to the North Fork, because this is not a luckily this is invasive. It was found in Pennsylvania in 2014, I believe, and it's spread throughout. The running theory is it came in on granite shipment from China. So the problem is this thing lays eggs on everything. You could park your car, say you're going down to Philly kind of thing, and it could park, by the time you leave, you could unwillingly have the eggs on your car and bring it up to Long Island. That's how these things are all spread. But just to make people aware, this is more of an annoyance, which is good. We really thought it's going to be a huge issue and really, really kill trees. But the real concern is, like I said, getting to the North Fork, because it does attack and kill and cause billions of dollars of damage to wineries, the vineyards, apple orchards, peach trees. It loves anything in that fruit family. It really loves to feed on. But it's an interesting looking insect. You'll see them soon if you haven't already. A funny story I heard of, a woman in New Jersey brought in her Christmas tree, and all these little guys hatched, and she thought they were ticks, and she had thousands of them throughout her house. And so that was another one how they found lanternfly. But it's just coming all over. Like I said, it started off in Pennsylvania, and we're starting to see it everywhere. And again, if anyone has spent much time upstate, but there's a huge all the Finger Lakes are full of wineries. So again, we're really concerned of it moving up into there. This insect is handled by agriculture and markets. So we don't call us. We know it's here. We know it's a problem. The real issue is this is a true invasive, whereas Southern Pine Beetle is a native, but it moves up further north because the climate change. Emerald ash borer is a true invasive. Asian longhorn is a true invasive. So this is really just, we're going to have to learn to live with it. That's the difference with pine beetle. Pine beetle, we actually can manage. We can try to, and have shown success with doing management. This is more just, it's here. Hopefully, the hope is that like maybe our native birds will start to eat them, kind of thing. But it's just like with any invasives, it's going to take off, and eventually it's going to level out. But unfortunately, there's nothing we can really do with this. This is more just to make people aware, kind of thing. And that's it.
Thank you again, John. If anyone has
course.
any other questions before, I have one actually from a coworker.
Sure.
Come on over to me. Just reading it.
Yeah.
The handwriting. Okay. Are there any natural oils or sprays that could cover the pheromones to deter attacks and promote healthy trees?
Not that we know of. There are some treatments that have to be used by licensed applicator. I haven't heard of anyone using it or how effective it is. I know there are pesticides that are licensed. I'm sorry, labeled for the use of especially pine beetle. I don't know of anyone who's done it because it is pretty costly. And then the same thing too is probably have to apply it. I'm not an applicator, but you probably have to apply it every year, kind of thing, because it doesn't stay on the tree. And the issue is, you're probably just sadly delaying the inevitable, because eventually, if there is a big outbreak near your home, it's just a matter of time before that tree is affected.
Hey,
I have a question, John, actually.
Sure.
The photo you had showed earlier that had half of the screen of the thin forest and half of the screen that had very dense pitch pine forest. I was looking at the area that was healthier on the left and wondering, I mean, I don't see downed trees. So do they drop them and chip them, or they haul them away? I'm just kind of trying to figure out this photograph a little better.
Yeah, so probably I just stole this from the internet. I would assume they probably did a logging job. Unfortunately, with our situation, like I said, it's so cost uh, to ship. We have done some thinning projects where we've done more logging style, where we've removed the trees. The trees actually went up to Saratoga to the paper plant, but it was extremely cost prohibitive. So sadly, with Long Island, we're stuck with there's no market for the trees that we're stuck with cut and leave. We have to leave them on the grounds. In ideal world, yeah, we would love to remove the material because it's a fire risk. It's the fire departments. I agree with them. It's dangerous for them to drive in. Now there's all these down trees, but yeah. So in ideal world, this is what we would like to see.
Thank you.
Yeah.
would you be able to spell the pheromone or
Oh, verbenone. Yeah,
um,
it's VERBONE, I believe. But just Google it. I believe it. I don't know how much it is, but I know like if anyone's aware, Sisters of St. Joseph property, we're in the process of buying a conservation easement on their forest, and so it'll be protected in perpetuity. But I know they're doing a little bit of work with the verbenone traps, so I'm really curious to see how well it works in a forest situation. But they're only dealing with 40 acres, so it's not a we're that's the problem is with us is we're dealing with, like I said, thousands of acres. But if anyone does use it, please let me know. I'm really curious to see how well it works, if it does work.
where would you get something like that?
You know, I would just Google it. I'm sure someone sells it.
Um, this is a question probably more for us, but is there any indication of the southern pine beetle or the lanternfly at the refuge? So we luckily haven't seen the lanternfly that I know of, but we are currently dealing with the southern pine
Right,
beetle.
right. Yeah, you definitely have it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um, at Saranoff, there was a recent controlled burn, and
Mhm.
since West Hampton had a large burn more than 20 years ago, any comments regarding new species or new pine regeneration at either site?
That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, bring more fire into the forest. We actually back in 2022, it was the first time we've burned in the forest. We burn grasslands every year in 20 years. So it's been a long process. I've been with the department 10 years, so it's remarkable to see the difference. We started off, with no fires in the forest, and now we're starting to do more. But sadly, we just we're not burning as much as we can, and we're due for another wildfire for sure.
Someone said they cut down trees in their property that were affected. What did you say about the chance that the beetles won't die because we didn't chip them, just left them on our property?
Well, the beetles, they're going to emerge. So by the time you probably cut the tree, they're already gone. You can see there's like little pinpricks throughout the bark, and that's the adults boring their way out of the tree. So most likely by the time you realize the tree is dead, the beetles have already vacated and they're going to another tree. So it's kind of one of those, that's why we don't cut the dead trees, because it's not doing anything. Dead trees are habitat, of course. But yeah, probably by the time you notice that the trees are already vacated, or beetles have vacated.
Who's responsible for tree removal? They're
Um,
commenting, yeah, that there's just a lot of down trees that they see on Route 27.
oh, right. That's so essentially simple answer is it comes down to who owns the trees, kind of thing. So, you have DEC, you have state parks, you have DOT right of ways. So with that certain situation, that is state parks and DOT that are quote unquote responsible for removing the trees. I know they did do a lot of cuttings, but that's a real concern of, now we have all those, and I've been to the area. It's very sad to see all those dead trees. Concern about a wildfire because it's, there's one road in, one road out. So I know that, it's not DEC, it's state parks. But I know that they're very rightfully so, very concerned about a wildfire coming through.
All right. So far, no new questions. So if anyone has any
Yeah.
other questions real quick before we end the
Yeah, and I'll put
program.
up my information at the end. So, if you think about something down the road, if you call me, I may not answer. And like I said, I got two young ones, so I'm not in the office that much these days. But if you email me, I will get back to you eventually.
All right. Well, we want to thank you, John,
Yeah,
for
thanks for having
this
me.
amazing program. Very informative. And thank everyone for joining us tonight. And if anyone has any questions for us also, feel free to call or email us too.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. That's it, right?
Looks like it's, yeah, everyone's just saying thank you. So,
Okay. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
all right. Have a great night.
You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.